right, so we're diving into something pretty fascinating today. Yorkshire's myths, legends, and symbolism. This book, it really gets into some themes I think you'll find interesting, especially like uncovering those hidden truths about masculinity and spirituality.
Yeah.
And how institutions, play into all that, how they've changed over time.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's remarkable how this book uses Yorkshire's history and myths, even the landscape, to really unpack these ideas. And it doesn't shy away, from challenging some of those modern perspectives, especially what it sees as like the influence of cultural Marxism.
For sure. And right off the bat, the book introduces all these legendary figures from Yorkshire, obviously. Guys like Sir Francis Drake, King Arthur, even Captain John Smith. They're all like embodying what the book calls that divine masculine archetype. What really struck you about these examples?
Well, it's fascinating because the book uses them, right, to illustrate specific qualities. It's not just some vague idea of masculinity. Take Drake, for instance. His unwavering, pursuit of his mission, circumnavigating the globe against, incredible odds. That's a powerful example of courage and resilience, And it resonates, I think, with this idea of a man fulfilling his purpose no matter what.
Yeah, no other obstacle. It's inspiring, for sure.
And then you've got King Arthur, a figure, shrouded in myth, but still representing this ideal of chivalric leadership, a strong moral code. It's like these figures,
Right.
They offer a blueprint almost for how masculinity can be a force for good.
Absolutely. A positive force.
Exactly. And then there's Captain John Smith, founding Jamestown. The book highlights, his perseverance in the face of, just incredible odds in the New World, grit, determination. That's core, the book argues, to true masculinity.
Yeah, I see that. And it's not just these individual figures, right? The book dives into historical events, like the War of the Roses, even the English Civil War. It argues that these were like crucibles where that masculine strength was tested, forged, on a societal level even?
Yeah, totally. It's like the book is saying these events, they shaped institutions and cultural norms in ways that, are very different from what we see today. And it directly connects that shift to the rise of feminism and, of course, what it sees as the negative influences of Marxism.
Okay, so now, this is where it gets really interesting, I think, for you, especially, as someone who's interested in how institutions have evolved over time. Because the book, it makes this case that there's a deliberate agenda at play, one that's actually seeking to undermine traditional masculinity and then reshape those societal structures.
Yeah, right. And it ties us back to covert contracts, those unspoken agreements that basically govern all our interactions, often without us even realizing it. And you mentioned you wanted to explore this in your own life, right? Well, the book, it offers some powerful tools, I think, for identifying and challenging these contracts.
Sure, for sure. I'm thinking about, your involvement with the married red pill community and how this book's exploration of brotherhood, even historical initiation rituals, could offer some real insights there. What stood out to you in those sections?
Well, what's fascinating is the book links these rituals to the development of responsibility and accountability in men. It's arguing that these ceremonies, marking the transition to manhood, they instilled a sense of duty and belonging within the community. It's almost like, they provided a framework for navigating those unspoken contracts in a way that actually benefited both the individual and society as a whole.
That's a really interesting connection. So let's unpack this cultural Marxism idea a bit further, because I know it's something that, you're interested in. And the book doesn't hold back, really, in its critique.
No, it doesn't. It presents this view that cultural Marxism, it's essentially an attack on traditional gender roles, and it seeks to redefine masculinity in a way that, the book argues is harmful. It raises concerns about the blurring of gender lines, the portrayal of masculinity as toxic, and that perceived attack on the family unit as a whole.
Yeah, it's a pretty strong stance. And, I think it's important for our listeners to know that we're not necessarily endorsing these views, but rather presenting them as they're laid out in the book.
It's crucial to engage with these ideas critically and come to your own conclusion. This book, it provides a lot to think about, especially if you're, interested in how these ideas might be impacting society. And of course, your own life. Another point that really stuck with me, especially thinking about red pill philosophy, is how the book emphasizes balancing spirituality and rationality. It's not about just blind faith, It's more like a thoughtful approach, a critical approach even.
Yeah, they call it the pragmatic spirituality. It's not getting lost in the clouds. It's more about applying those spiritual teachings to your daily life, making real improvement, tangible stuff.
Exactly. It's like the book's saying faith shouldn't just sit there. It should be a driver, for action, for becoming a better man in practical ways. And it tackles the tough questions, even about doubt, suggesting that questioning, can actually make your faith stronger, not weaker.
It's interesting. They use a great example, the construction of those grand cathedrals, in Yorkshire.
Oh yeah, those massive structures. The book argues that they're a testament to like human ingenuity and that determination, drive, driven by deep faith, of course, but also requiring, incredible skill and plan. It's a powerful example of how spirituality and that rational side, can work together hand in hand. I think you'll appreciate that, given your focus on taking action, driving positive change.
Sure. Now, something I know is close to your heart, especially, being part of that married red pill community, brotherhood and community.
Yeah.
The book really puts emphasis on those strong male bonds and dives into the history of how those bonds were, forged and maintained.
What I found fascinating is how the book explores those historical initiation rituals.
Okay.
It suggests that these rituals, they were symbolic, like transitions to manhood, instilling a sense of responsibility and creating this framework for healthy relationships within the community even.
A way to, define those roles and responsibilities for men, specifically, in society. Something that, the book argues we've kind of lost today.
Exactly. And the book connects this to those covert contracts, suggesting that understanding those historical precedents can help us navigate, those unspoken agreements that basically govern our interactions today, especially, within marriage and family.
Now, the book tackles toxic masculinity, which is a hot topic these days, but approaches it from a different angle, wouldn't you say, than what we usually hear?
Right. It challenges that whole notion that masculinity itself is the problem. It argues that true masculinity, characterized by those good qualities, courage, honor, responsibility, it's been distorted and even demonized, really, by, what the book sees as those forces of cultural Marxism.
So it's like we've, thrown out the good with the bad.
Yeah.
We've rejected those positive aspects along with the negative ones. And that's what's created this sense of, confusion and frustration for a lot of men.
Yeah, and the book connects this to the victim mentality. You see it, among some men today. It argues that while, it might come from some genuine pain and frustration, ultimately it keeps men from taking ownership, of their lives, becoming those best versions of themselves.
It's about empowerment then. Men stepping up, reclaiming those positive aspects that the book argues have been suppressed.
Exactly. And it ties this back to that spiritual renewal. It suggests that by rediscovering their spiritual roots, men can find, a deeper sense of purpose, meaning, and that can empower them to, overcome those feelings of victimhood and become active, agents of change in their own lives and the world even.
Now, another concept, mental fortitude. The book frames it as a defining characteristic of true masculinity.
Right. It talks about how, the ability to handle those challenges, overcome obstacles, and maintain a positive mindset is crucial for men, not just for themselves either, but for their roles as leaders, protectors, providers within their families, their community.
Mental strength is a muscle. It needs to be developed. And the book actually offers some strategies, practical stuff. It emphasizes, discipline, resilience, emotional intelligence even, not just physical strength.
And it highlights the importance of brotherhood, too, and community in that.
Yeah.
Cultivating that mental fortitude, having that supportive network, like-minded men can provide, invaluable encouragement and accountability. I mean, this resonates so much with, what you're involved in, the married red pill community. It seems like that shared purpose, and mutual support can be a powerful force for positive change.
Sure, for sure. It ties back to the book's earlier points about those historical initiation rituals and creating those strong bonds between men. It's like those practices had a built-in mechanism.
For resilience, right?
Mental toughness, something we lack,
In modern society, okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the book's exploration of Yorkshire's natural landscape, because it's more than just pretty scenery, It frames the landscape itself as sacred geography, a source of spiritual inspiration and guidance.
Sacred geography. That's a new one. It is an interesting concept. The book encourages readers, to engage with nature, not just for fun, but as a way to connect with a deeper meaning, maybe, and purpose, even.
Right. It talks about how those rhythms of nature, they teach us about resilience, adaptability, even the interconnectedness of everything. It's almost like the landscape itself, It's a living testament to the power of creation and that divine order of the universe.
I like that. Seeing the divine in the everyday, the beauty all around us, finding peace and tranquility in the natural world, especially, when the world feels so chaotic and uncertain.
Exactly. And this ties back to reclaiming masculinity. The book suggests that by connecting with nature, men can, tap into those primal instincts, those deep-seated desires for exploration, adventure, mastery even. All that's been suppressed by modern society.
Okay, so another interesting aspect, brotherhood and community. The book really emphasizes the strong male bonds again, arguing that those relationships, they're essential, not just for men either, but for a healthy society as a whole.
It goes deeper than just saying, hey, men need friends, you know. It delves into the history of brotherhood, exploring how men traditionally came together for support, guidance, you know, shared purpose. It's highlighting a fundamental aspect, I think, of human nature that's been eroded by, well, that modern individualism we're all talking about.
Right, connects this to the challenges men are facing,
Yeah.
today especially. That sense of isolation, lack of direction. The book argues that by rediscovering those principles, of brotherhood, men can find that support, the guidance they need to navigate life. It's complicated out there.
And it's fascinating, isn't it, how it ties back to those covert contracts we were talking about, you know. It suggests that by forming those strong bonds with other men, we create this, like, network of trust and accountability. And that can help us to identify, even challenge those unspoken agreements that might be holding us back.
So brotherhood is, what, an antidote to
Right.
those negative influences. That cultural Marxism, the book argues, providing that sense of belonging. And shared purpose, a counter to those forces that try to divide us.
And the book doesn't just talk about the benefits either. It actually gives practical guidance, on how to cultivate these relationships. It talks about shared values, finding men who, share your core beliefs, your principles.
It's intentionally seeking those connections, not just waiting around hoping they happen.
Right.
And active participation too. Being a good brother, not just taking, but giving.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The book explores the role of symbolism, too, in brotherhood. It talks about how symbols can serve as, powerful reminders of shared history, values, experience. They create a sense of unity, even, and identity among men.
Like using tangible objects
Yeah.
to represent those, abstract concepts, making them more real, relatable. It encourages thinking about those symbols that mean something to you and how to use them to strengthen those bonds, with other men.
It's almost like creating a visual language, isn't it, for brotherhood? A way to communicate those unspoken understandings, shared aspirations.
And it brings us back to Yorkshire's myths and legends. The book suggests that those stories themselves, they're full of symbols that can inspire us, guide us even on that journey of spiritual renewal and, masculine self-discovery.
Now, let's talk about something that's become, a big issue in recent years. This whole demonization of masculinity. The book really dives into it, arguing that there's been a deliberate effort to paint those traditional masculine traits, as negative and harmful.
It's a bold statement, but it's something I think a lot of men feel deep down. The book argues that this demonization, it stems from cultural Marxism, that seeks to undermine traditional gender roles, create this more egalitarian society.
And it explores the consequence, the negative ones. It argues that this has led to a rise in those mental health issues among men, a decline of fatherhood, even a weakening of societal structures, those foundations.
We're trying to correct past injustices, right? But we've swung too far the other way. And now we've got a whole new set of problems.
Right. And the book offers a counter narrative. It suggests that true masculinity, when you really get it, embrace it. It's a powerful force for good in the world.
It's those qualities, courage, strength, leadership, that sense of responsibility. Those are essential for a healthy society. We need to reclaim those positive aspects.
It's about empowering men to be their best, not conform, to some standard set by, those who just want to control and manipulate.
Okay, let's talk about a specific aspect here. The warrior ethos. The book really dives into that, a concept that's, often misunderstood, right, even demonized. But the book presents a different take, a nuanced one.
Yeah, it acknowledges that the warrior as an archetype, it's been distorted, misused throughout history even. But it argues that, at its core, the warrior ethos is about good things. Courage, discipline, selflessness even, a willingness to protect the weaker.
Like every man has that warrior inside, right? But it doesn't have to be aggression or violence.
Right, it's about channeling that warrior energy into something positive, becoming a protector, a provider, a leader for your family, your community.
And it ties back to that spiritual renewal, right?
Yep.
True strength comes from aligning yourself with a higher purpose, fighting for something bigger than yourself.
Exact. And the book, it uses historical examples to illustrate this, talking about warriors who are also deeply faithful men, men who saw their battles as part of this, larger spiritual struggle.
Right. So the battle isn't always physical. It can be spiritual, emotional, even ideological even. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard.
Okay, let's shift gears again, back to nature. Because the book, it goes beyond just appreciating the pretty views. It frames the natural world as a teacher, a guide, a source of healing even.
It encourages readers to, spend time there, not just for a hike, but to learn from nature, from its rhythms and patterns.
It's like a living textbook, isn't it? Full of wisdom and guidance, if you know how to read it.
Now, another interesting aspect is Yorkshire's built environment, those sacred sites, The book talks about how the architecture, the symbolism, all those things can offer insights into the region's spiritual history, its values.
It's like the book saying, hey, these buildings, the monuments, they aren't just objects. They're full of meaning, energy even. They're powerful reminders of our connection to the past, to the divine.
Pay attention to the details. See the stories embedded in those stones, the carvings, the stained glass even.
And by connecting with these sacred sites, we can tap into, something deeper, a sense of spirituality, find some peace, even a sense of purpose.
Okay, something I know you're interested in, especially with those covert contracts we were talking about. The book's discussion of personal responsibility and accountability.
Right, the book frames them as essential qualities for living a godly life, It argues that we're all accountable to God for what we do, and we should try to live in a way that honors him.
True freedom comes with responsibility. We have the power to choose our actions, but then we have to live with the consequences, right?
And it connects us back to, masculine men have that special responsibility to be accountable for their actions, be leaders in their families, their communities.
Now, the book delves into work as worship, something I know resonates with a lot of men, seeking that deeper sense of purpose.
Yeah, it's like our daily work can be spiritual if we approach it the right way, Working hard, being productive, using our talents to serve others. We honor God and we make a positive impact on the world.
It's finding fulfillment,
Yeah.
In what you do. It's not a chore. It's a calling, a way to express your masculinity, to make a real contribution to society.
Now, the book acknowledges we all face challenges, setbacks. It explores failure and pain, but, from this perspective of growth and resilience.
It's like failure isn't the end. It's just one chapter. You learn, you grow, you come back stronger.
Exactly. And pain, it's not something to just run from. It can be like a catalyst for transformation, forces you to confront your weaknesses, reevaluate what's important, and, really appreciate life.
Now, as a husband, I know this topic's got to be on your mind. The book's perspective on, the role of women in a godly society.
The book presents a perspective that some might consider, traditional, emphasizes the unique strengths, contributions of women within like a framework that puts family first.
Okay, so it highlights those roles as helpers, nurturers, spiritual guides. It's not about being subservient. It's more like they're complementary roles, right, to men's roles.
Yeah, and it emphasizes women embracing their femininity, but not, in a way that diminishes them. It's more about recognizing that inherent difference between men and women.
And it's clear about femininity versus feminism. It argues that feminism tries to erase those differences, pit men and women against each other.
And it uses those examples from Yorkshire's history, the folklore.
Like the women who, supported their husbands, fathers, sons as warriors, leaders, builders. They played a huge role in shaping Yorkshire's legacy.
Their strength, their resilience, their faith, it was essential for their families, their community.
Okay, the book also explores women's spiritual influence. They have that unique ability, it argues, to nurture faith, guide others towards what's right, and create peace, harmony in their homes, their communities.
It talks about women passing down those, faith and values to future generations, shaping the morals of society, really.
And it encourages embracing those roles as mothers, wives, not as burdens, but as, sacred callings.
Now, I realize this perspective might not, click with everyone, especially those who, have more egalitarian views on gender roles.
But it's worth thinking about.
Yeah.
Especially if you're trying to understand how those traditional values, beliefs, have shaped societies and, continue to influence us today. Our understanding of masculinity, femininity.
It's about recognizing that this is a complex topic and being willing to, have a real discussion, even when we disagree.
The book also emphasizes the importance of women understanding and resisting those, influences of cultural Marxism. It suggests that this ideology seeks to undermine, their true strength, their purpose.
Right. It encourages women to be discerning, to think critically about the messages they're getting, and to choose to align themselves with, God's design for their lives.
So it's about finding your true identity, your purpose, not in what's trendy, but in the unchanging truth of God's word.
Okay, now let's shift our focus to those Yorkshire myths and legends, because the book uses them, to illustrate these themes we've been talking about.
They're like a window into the soul of Yorkshire, revealing its values, its beliefs, its hopes.
Myths and legends, they often try to explain what we can't, make sense of the world, connect with something bigger than ourselves.
And even though they're fictional, right?
Yeah.
They often contain those, profound truths about human nature, the spiritual world, that battle between good and evil.
So the book looks at, a whole bunch of these, from Yorkshire, of course, tales of giants, dragons, fairies, all sorts of mythical creatures.
Analyzes what they symbolize, connecting them to those themes of masculinity, femininity, spiritual growth, And of course, the battle against cultural Marxism.
Take the Green Man of Whitby, for example, a figure from local folklore. Represents that cycle of rebirth in nature.
The book suggests he's a symbol of, like, masculine vitality, that life-giving force, essential for growth and renewal.
Ties that back to the importance of men, embracing their strengths, using them for good.
Okay, so the book also explores the symbolism of the Yorkshire landscape, how the rivers, valleys, mountains, caves, all of it, how they've been interpreted over time.
Those natural features, they often become metaphors for spiritual ideas, representing challenges, transformation, even the interconnectedness of everything.
It's like the landscape is this living proof of God's power, a source of inspiration, even guidance.
And by connecting with nature, we can tap into that, that deeper spirituality, find some peace and purpose.
Now, the book uses real people from Yorkshire's history, too, as examples of, well, the virtues it championed.
Like Sir Francis Drake, right, whose courage, determination, faith made him a symbol of that divine masculine.
And then you have women, like Bronte's sister. Their literary works explored faith, love, the human condition. It's all there.
It's recognizing that spiritual journey, It's not just abstract idea, it's about real people, grappling with real challenges, finding ways to live meaningful lives.
Now, the book goes into the concept of archetypes. Those universal patterns of behavior, personality. They show up in myths and legends from, well, everywhere.
Like the hero, the mentor, the trickster, even the shadow, representing different parts of the human psyche.
So you can try to identify the ones that are at play in your own life, understand your strengths and weaknesses, and use that to grow and evolve.
Like a roadmap,
right,
for that spiritual journey. A way to understand the challenges, those opportunities that come your way.
And storytelling, it has a role in spiritual development. Stories are powerful tools for, teaching, inspiring, even transform.
They help us make sense of the world, connect with something bigger than ourselves, find that meaning and purpose in our lives.
It encourages, engaging with stories from all cultures, all traditions,
yeah.
Seeing those universal truths, using them to enrich your own, spiritual journey.
Storytelling. It's a fundamental part of who we are, right? Those stories shape our beliefs, our values, our understanding of the world.
The book also talks about initiation ritual, those ceremonies that mark, big transitions in life, foster a sense of belonging, and pass on wisdom, knowledge.
They've been used throughout history, all over the world, really. Rites of passage into adulthood, marriage, even spiritual leadership.
They're often symbolic, but they can have this profound impact psychologically and spiritually on the people who go through them.
It's a way to make those interchanges, more real.
Now, mentorship, the book really pushes that as well. Having that wise, experienced guide, it's invaluable on this journey.
They offer support, encouragement, keep you accountable, give you practical advice.
Find yourself a mentor, an older family member, a teacher you respect, a spiritual leader, someone.
Right. You don't have to go it alone. There are people who've been there, done that. They can help you navigate all those challenges.
And then be a mentor yourself. Share what you've learned. Help those coming up behind you.
Pay it forward, create that chain of support, guidance, strengthens the whole community.
Now, the book goes into spiritual awakening, that process of becoming more aware of who you really are, your connection to the divine, your purpose.
It can be triggered by, all sorts of things. A crisis of faith, a near-death experience, a profound encounter with nature. Who knows?
And often it comes with this expanded consciousness. You understand reality differently. And your heart is more, compassionate, loving.
It's a whole shift in perspective, realizing there's more to life than what you see on the surface.
Now, spiritual awakening, it can be tough too, right? Orienting, even painful, the book says.
Our old beliefs, our assumptions, they might crumble. You might experience loss, confusion, even resistance from people who, they just don't get it.
Be patient, seek support, trust the process. It's ultimately leading you where you need to be.
It's a process, not a destination, Take it one step at a time.
Now, the book also explores spiritual enlightenment, that state of deep peace, joy, liberation, from fully realizing that oneness, with God.
It's often described as transcendence. Your ego disappears and you experience unity with everything.
It's a journey, not a destination. You can strive for it throughout your life.
Right. Your true nature is divine. You have that potential to experience that divinity right now.
And spiritual practices play a role too. Meditation, prayer, yoga, serving others, all those things.
They help quiet the mind, cultivate inner peace, connect with who you really are.
Find those practices that work for you. Make them a regular part of your life.
It's about creating a lifestyle, that supports your spiritual growth and helps you move towards, enlightenment.
Now let's talk about spiritual liberation. That freedom from suffering, from attachment, from those limitations of, the ego.
It's often described as an awakening, right? Yeah. Where you realize You're not your thoughts, your feelings, your experience. You're the awareness that observes them.
It's possible for everyone, the book says. Doesn't matter your background, your beliefs, your experience.
True freedom, it's inside you. It's not about your external circumstance.
And those spiritual practices help, right? Meditation, mindfulness, self-inquiry.
Yeah, they help you detach, from those thoughts and emotions. Cultivate that inner peace. Realize your true nature.
Again, find what works for you. Make it part of your life.
Create that lifestyle that, supports your growth.
Yeah.
It helps you move towards liberation.
Now, spiritual transformation, it's a process of profound change, growth. It can happen at any point in your life.
It can be triggered by a lot of things. A crisis of faith, a big life change, a profound spiritual encounter.
And often, it comes with a sense of renewal, deeper connection with God, a more authentic, purposeful way of living.
It's like, that caterpillar turning into a butterfly, shedding those old patterns, merging as something new.
And those spiritual practices play a role here too. Prayer, meditation, service to others, spending time in nature.
They help you connect with the divine, cultivate inner peace, open yourself up to change.
Find what works for you. Make it part of your life.
Create that lifestyle that supports your growth, lets that transformation happen.
Now, the book talks about spiritual purpose, that each of us was created with a unique purpose to fulfill.
Discover your purpose. Use your gifts, your talent to serve God, serve others. Live a life that means something, fulfilling life.
It's recognizing that we're not just here to, exist. We have something to give.
And then there's that spiritual legacy, We should try to leave a positive mark, something that outlives us.
It's raising that next generation, mentoring young people,
Yeah.
investing in our communities.
Our actions have consequences, right? They ripple out. We have a responsibility to make the world better for those who come after us.
And then, while there's eternity, the book argues that this life, it's just a preview of something much bigger.
We need to prepare for eternity, make sure we're right with God, live in a way that, earns us a place in heaven.
This life is temporary, right? But eternity is forever. Our choices here matter. They have eternal consequence.
And hope. It's so important, the book argues, for those challenges, for staying focused on the goal.
Hope gives us the strength to keep going, even when it's hard, and reminds us that God is always with us.
Find hope in God's promises, His faithfulness, knowing He has a plan for you, even when you can't see it.
And faith, it's the foundation, of our relationship with God. It's what empowers us to live a life that pleases Him.
It's more than just believing, it's trusting.
Having confidence in His character, His promises, His ability to, work everything out for good.
And love, of course, the greatest virtue. It should be in every part of our lives.
It's not just a feeling, it's a choice, a commitment, an action.
God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and love your neighbor as yourself.
And remember, love is patient, love is kind, it doesn't envy, it doesn't boast, it's not proud, it doesn't dishonor others, it's not selfish, it's not easily angered, it doesn't keep score, it doesn't delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres.
Now let's talk about joy. That deep sense of contentment, satisfaction, it comes from knowing God, experiencing His love.
Joy isn't about what's happening around you, it's about your relationship with God.
Find joy even in the trials, Focus on what's good, be grateful.
True joy is a gift from God. We find it through prayer, worship, being with other believers.
And peace. It's that tranquility, that calmness that comes from knowing God is in control.
Peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's God's presence in the midst of it.
Find peace in His presence. Trust Him. Let go of your worries, your fear.
True peace, a gift from Him. We find it through prayer, meditation, spending time in His Word.
Okay, now patience. The ability to, endure those hard times without getting discouraged, without giving up.
It's a fruit of the Spirit. It's essential for spiritual growth.
Develop patience by practicing self-control. Trusting God's timing. Remembering He's working everything out, for your good.
Patience isn't passive. It's an active choice to persevere, even when it's tough.
And kindness. Being gentle, caring, compassionate to others.
It reflects God's character. It should be in all our interactions.
Be thoughtful. Speak words of encouragement. Go out of your way to help someone.
Kindness isn't weakness. It's strength. It can change the world.
Okay. And goodness. Being morally upright, virtue.
It's the fruit of the Spirit. It shows in our actions, words, thoughts.
Pursue goodness. Align your life with God's will. Make choices that are honorable. Just do what's right.
It's not about being perfect. It's about being more like Christ every day.
And then there's faithfulness. Being loyal, trustworthy, dependable.
Essential for strong relationship, for a healthy society, for a vibrant spiritual life.
Keep your promise, stand by your conviction, even when it's hard.
Because God is faithful.
Yeah.
He'll never leave you. You can trust Him completely.
Now, gentleness, being mild-mannered, humble, considerate.
It's a fruit of the Spirit, too. And it's powerful, a force for good.
Be patient, listen well, speak kindly, even when you disagree.
Gentleness isn't weakness, it's strength. Disarms your enemies, wins over hearts.
And finally, self-control, managing your emotion, your desire, your behavior.
Essential for living a godly life, for making good choices, for resisting temptation.
Practice discipline, set boundaries, seek God's help when you're struggling.
It's not about denying yourself pleasure. It's about choosing what's best for the long run.
Okay, now the book explores spiritual maturity. It's a process, growth, development. It takes time, it takes effort.
It's not about how old you are or how much you experience. It's about your relationship with God, your character, the choices you make.
To pursue spiritual maturity, study God's word, pray, serve others, find wise counsel.
That's a lifelong journey, this spiritual maturity. We never stop growing, but we should always be trying, to be more like Christ.
Now, the book also goes into spiritual discernment, that ability to tell the difference, It's the ability to know what's true, what's false, what's good, what's evil, and recognizing, God's will versus your own desire. So important, right? Especially while the world's trying to pull you in so many directions, you need that discernment to make wise choices, to avoid those traps, to stay on that path that, aligns with your values.
Yeah, it's about strengthening that discernment muscle, studying the Bible, seeking guidance through prayer, and finding wise counsel, surrounding yourself with people who have, solid perspective, people you trust.
And the book makes this interesting point. Discernment is a gift from God. You have to ask for it. It's not just gonna, happen on its own.
Absolutely. And then the book gets into this idea of, spiritual warfare, a battle for our souls, it calls it. You got to be vigilant, Recognize that there are forces out there trying to tempt you, distract you, pull you away from, the path you've chosen.
For you, especially, being involved in the married red pill community, working on personal growth, this idea of spiritual warfare might really resonate. Like, yeah, there are those battles, internal and external, as you try to become a better man. And the book gives you, strategy, practical things you can do. Put on the armor of God, stand strong in your faith. Resist all that negativity. It's not always easy, but you have the tools to overcome those challenges.
Prayer is a big part of that. Praying for protection, guidance, strength. Recognizing that, you're not alone in this fight.
It's drawing on that higher power, seeking support, direction when you face those conflicts, both inside and out. And the book also emphasizes community here.
Yeah, find a church, a group of like-minded people. You need that support, shared prayer, encouragement, that sense of brotherhood, right? The strength of standing together with others who, share your values.
It's recognizing that we're stronger together. You hold each other accountable, offer support when someone struggles. That's a powerful message, especially in a world that, pushes you to be on your own all the time.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Yorkshire's myths, legends, and symbolism, what's your biggest takeaway? What's sticking with you?
It's the emphasis on action, taking those spiritual, philosophical concepts and, putting them into practice every day. It's not just about reading and nodding along. It's about becoming better. Better men, better husbands, better members of our community.
Absolutely. Taking owner, challenging those, covert contracts that might be holding you back. And striving for that spiritual renewal. The book lays it all out.
And for anyone listening who's, intrigued by what they've heard, I highly recommend checking out the book, Yorkshire's Myths, Legends, and Symbolism, A Spiritual Landscape for Men. It's available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
It's full of insights, a real call to action for men who are searching for a deeper understanding of masculinity, spirituality, and their place in the world. So go check it out. And until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep diving deep.